Once a fish met a turtle and asked, everyone is speaking about the ocean, and they say that the ocean is a very huge thing, but I can't see it. I'm looking around and I can see sand, shells, other fishes that are fighting for their lives. But where is this ocean? I can't see it. And the turtle, of course, answers, you know, the ocean is all around you, and it is even in you, because you are totally immersed in it. But if you look at a special thing, you can't know it. So, this is also our condition. Everything we can perceive, everything we can know, everything we can understand is a limited form. And so we can never understand, know, perceive the ocean, what is, the totality, the whole of existence. Our mind draws many maps in order to understand reality. And we can see reality only through those maps of mind, of conceptual and made of words and concepts, you know? And usually these maps are a simplification of the territory. You cannot have a map that is like the territory, otherwise it would be as big as the territory. So the map must simplify, schematize through simpler patterns the territory. And what is in the map is what is useful for us as living organisms to survive. But we pay a price for this. For example, the concept of a tree. If you just ask your concept of the tree, how it is, it usually comes into your mind as an image that's very similar to when children draw a tree. The concept of the tree for us usually is just made of a couple of things. There is the green part, there are the branches and the leaves, that is one part, and then there is the trunk and maybe also the roots. Sometimes we don't see the roots in our concept of the tree. And that is enough for us, enough for knowing how we can use the tree. For example, we can, with this image, we can know that we cannot pass through a tree by car. So we must avoid the tree. And we can make some furniture from the wood, and maybe we can eat some fruit. But the price we pay in seeing the tree through the concept of the tree is that we lose the wonder of the moving leaves when the wind blows, and the extraordinary variety of nuances of green when the rays of the sun pass through the leaves, or the lines, the incredible lines that are on the trunk. Of course, if we are driving a car and are contemplating those lines, we can have an accident. So of course it's useful to have these maps. But we must be aware that the maps are really a simplification of what is. Paradoxically, with the use of concepts, even if concepts are simpler, it complicates our perception of reality. Because, reality is a huge amount of diversities, of varieties, that just present themselves all together in a unity. In just one moment, all this universe is showing itself through a variety of differences, but all together. And we, just in order to know it, try to give a name to every single aspect. And so, but the problem is that all these aspects are really nuances of one. When we use concepts and give different names to different nuances, we begin to believe that the universe is made of fragments that are only, this idea is only due to the fact that there is a different name for different things. For example, an apple is different from the branch is different from the tree, which is different from the seed, and so on. But the seed, the tree, the branch, the flower, the fruit are just different names we give to one nameless process, which can't be separate from the overall process that we call the universe. So it's very useful, but the idea comes that universe is made of fragments, each fragment separate from the others, and each fragment corresponding to a concept. And once we have done this operation, we try to understand the whole just by connecting those fragments with other concepts which describe the relationships among the fragments. And so we complicate a lot our perception of the universe, and in the belief that if we make our concepts more and more complicated, more and more complex, at last maybe that we will have a complete picture of the whole. And this is an impossible task, because the very fact of using concepts makes the whole incomplete. So we leave the whole as a problem to be solved, while, as Wittgenstein said, if a problem is unsolvable, it's not a problem at all. It's just a mystery, And you can't solve a mystery as if it were a problem. You can only plunge into it. And when you plunge into it, you may be that you can realize that you don't need to understand it because you are it. And you can realize also that the mystery of existence is too simple to be known by the complications of our mind. It's actually so simple that it eludes any attempt to grasp it by our mind. However, sooner or later, our belief in concepts and maps just collapses spontaneously. And it happens more frequently than we imagine. Albeit we usually don't realize it consciously. But it happens during a day, many times, and we don't realize it. And then when it happens, we may find ourselves free-falling into an unknown space where the utter simplicity of what is explodes in the wonder of this incredible universe we live in. We are. You know, from time to time, our attention that is usually focusing on specific things, sounds, colors, thoughts, memories. Our attention is always focused on something. But from time to time, this attention stops doing it and reverts to a directionless suspension. I don't know if you noticed, it happens spontaneously, but since there is nothing specific to see, in those moments too are usually overlooked. And when it happens, a pure sense of being, simple sense of being, comes up spontaneously as a self-evident actuality. Just a feeling of being, not of being this or that. You know, the sense of being that the mind translates into the words I am is prior to any perception, to any sensation, to any thought. Because if, first of all, I am not here, if there is not this aware presence, nothing can appear. In fact, when we go and sleep in the deep, dreamless sleep, nothing appears. So the sense of being is prior to experience. But sometimes when our attention that is always looking at this or that stops for a while, it becomes self-evident, not as an object that is before us and we perceive our sense of being. No, because we are it. It's just shining through us as a simplicity but, that is evident, self-evident. Usually when we live, if we could translate our experiences, we could translate with the sentence, I am this, I am that. We say, for example, I am tired, I am happy, I am sad, I am intelligent, I am stupid, I am old, I am young, I am beautiful, I am ugly, and so on. And this sentence can show us how it works. First of all, I am. If I am not, no this and that can appear. So the I am opens the horizon of every this and that. But when we begin to see that I am this or that, all our attention gets focused only on this or that and overlooks what opens up the horizon of every here and that. This is because, of course, as living organisms and human beings with the body and the mind, for us it's very important to be happy and not sad, to be healthy and not with an illness, or to be intelligent and not stupid, and so on. So this attracts our attention, and the I am becomes overlooked. But the this and that changes a lot. First, at the beginning is I am young, then it becomes I am old, or I am happy, I am sad, and then I am happy again. So the this, I am this, comes and goes, changes. The I am doesn't change. It's what allows every this to appear and disappear. And how can I say that this I am, this pure aware presence is mine and not yours? That is only personal. You know, what is a person? What is personal? A body and a personality. What is a personality? It's just recurring patterns of behavior and emotion and thought. And all of that is the this of I am this. Because I can see my emotions, I can see my thoughts, I can see the recurring patterns that I call my personality, and I can see also my bodily processes. But the one who sees them has no feature, no personal feature. It's just seeing, it's just being. So the paradox is that what is the really root of my identity, this being and being aware, is not personal. It has nothing personal. All what makes me different from another one is the body or the mind, that is the this, what I am aware of. But the pure, simple fact of being aware and of existing, how can I say that my existing is different from yours? And so, what is easier to imagine that there are many different being and awarenesses that are totally identical, or that there is just one that, like the moon, then reflects in its totality in each pond of water. This sense of being is impersonal and formless. And so it can have a name or a concept that could grasp it. We use vague terms like maybe our true self or awareness and so on. But actually it's impossible to understand it with concepts, and there is no need to do that because we are it. We know it by identity, not by knowledge. When the sense of being, even the sense of being, collapses into the utter simplicity of what is, really, what really is, when the sense of being collapses into the utter simplicity of what is, nothing else remains but a mysterious aliveness. And that is what we really are. I would like to stop here, and maybe if there are some questions or reflections or whatever.
Anybody, any questions? Do you have any questions?
Pray, please.
I just want to thank you for the permission of simplicity and the profound power in the paradigm of simplicity, even in the mystery, the simplicity of the mystery, when we just allow that instead of fighting for some answer to prove something that we can't prove. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question or comments? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just didn't catch the last sentence where you were saying something. Just repeat the last sentence that you said.
We usually think, I will explain it, huh? As far as is it possible, with the premise that we cannot really understand what is. But if we ask the question, who am I? The question of our identity, we look for what doesn't change, because, of course, identity means what is always identical to itself. So, what doesn't change. So, when we are looking for our deeper identity, we can begin from the layers that change. That doesn't mean that we are not what changes, we are also what changes, but not only that, you know. And since, as I said, usually our attention goes only on what changes, we believe to be only that, and we overlook some deeper levels that don't change. So this is important, because if I discard layer after layer what changes, that doesn't mean that I am not those layers. I am everything. But anyway, in order to see what we usually don't see, it's necessary just to drop mentally those layers. So our body, that is the first thing that we identify with. But our body changes. It's enough to see one picture of ours of 10 years or 20 years ago, and we can see how much the body changes. And also, is the body my real and only identity? But if I, by accident, lose an arm, I have a body without an arm, but my identity, me, it remains the same. It doesn't lose anything. So the body changes. So I can put it apart, aside, and ask if the mind, if I am the mind, the mind, our thoughts change from instant to instant, and our ideas change. So if everything that changes is put apart, what remains? And usually what remains is just the simple fact that I exist and I am aware. So this is what doesn't change, because my existence and my being aware is the precondition for everything to appear. The entire universe appears to me because I am here and I am aware. So this is what we usually think is the ground of our identity. And somehow it is. But this sense of being, how can I say, is like a door. is where our minds can arrive by inspection, by inquiry. The last borderline where the mind can arrive by inquiry. If the mind goes a step beyond that door, it disappears. And what remains is not even the feeling of being, but a speechless and unknowable aliveness that is what we really are and has no boundaries. And so, you know, the sense of being from one side is a trap. Once I remember someone asked Nisargadatta when I was there, can you speak about the traps of the I am, the sense of being? And he answered, the I am is the trap. Because after that, all the universe appears, and all the universe appears with all our concepts and maps and so on. But on the other side, the I am is the door. The gateless gate, say the Chan tradition, and it calls it the gateless gate because you have that gate, maybe you go a step through, and when you turn back, there is no gate.
I will try to say something, though it's the first time. I will try to say something officially like this. Being in that openness that you refer to, I have not only experienced not focusing on objects, not only experienced being subject, not only experiencing not anything, but also something which we in ordinary language would refer to as something positive, like peace, like clarity, and also love.
Yeah. Yes, actually, that is our natural condition. It is called with many names, but it's the same, and non-duality underlines this. I mean, when there is the recognition by no one, I as a separate ego that don't exist. There is this I experience. What is a mirage is not that an I appears, but it's separation from everything. That is what is illusory. So, but when this illusion of being separate falls away for a while, maybe it comes and goes, the taste of that experience can be called love, can be called beauty, can be called peace. Because as I will this afternoon, I don't know, I have another session and I will go deeper on these things of the simplicity. But, you know, when the experience of beauty happens in its fullness, when the object and the subject disappear, the experience of beauty is not only because that thing is objectively beautiful, you know, because maybe another person doesn't see it as beautiful. And it's not only subjective. It's when this apparent separation collapses. Is the taste of non-duality in contemplation of beauty. Love is when you love someone, you want to dissolve the distance between you and the beloved until you become just one. That is the duality between me as a separate self and the other just collapses. And the experience is love. So love, beauty, peace is just the taste of non-dual being. And when I say that, for example, you cannot understand this simplicity, you cannot know this simplicity, it is because our knowing process is too complicated. And we have no need to know, because it's so simple. The absolute, what we call the absolute. Later on I will speak a lot about the absolute. Well, what we call the absolute, or God, or whatever word you want to use. It's something that, it's not something, is a wholeness. You are. So you cannot escape it even if you try. No need to. And the expression, the absolute as by itself, is so complete, so non-dual, that it has no need whatsoever to divide itself into a subject that observes an object. And nevertheless, even if it has no need to do that, it does through this reality, just because, just to play, just to be creative. So when one is asking about the meaning of life, the meaning of the all has no meaning, because the life is too rich, too vast, to be just boxed into a special meaning. It's meaning to itself. And the flavor of this meaning is not just an intellectual recognition, is a feeling of beauty, feeling of peace, feeling of love. And this doesn't excludes in life that we get angry, that we are fearful, that we have problems, that we lose our mind, and so on. But when you are involved in those maybe negative emotions, the peace, the love, the beauty are still there, are our deeper nature. We don't see them. We cannot see them. We are them. But momentary, like the sky, that when there are clouds, in those moments, just our illusory separate self can't see it, can't feel it.
I have 5 minutes. Oh. Sorry. Yeah. I was thinking that because it's nice that Mr. Saladini is before you, because I was thinking a little bit at a double slit experiment. Imagine that we are just that we as a person or
yes,
a human being are just that Geiger teller.
Yeah.
That Geiger machine who just clicks when it picks up something, and we don't, because those electrons they go forever. If there is a double slit or not, those electrons they go. They're just there, and we are maybe just a tiny machine which registrates the click of one electron. And we don't, and we just see then that only spot on that screen while there is interference everywhere.
Yes, I like what you are saying. I want to mention that Chantel and I are really close friends, even if we see not so often because he lives in Spain and I live in Italy. But as soon as we can, we meet and speak. And we have been writing a mail for 2 or 3 years, just discussing all these topics, and we feel very, very close to this idea. And so I don't know whether Shantena would agree with this, but I think that we, from one side, at the macroscopic level, we are this machine that you say that, but at the same time, contemporary, we are made of waves and particles, and we are also the quantum reality, where there is the overlapping of states. And it's interesting what he says. I don't know if he agrees, but because you have, if even in reality, there is no collapse of the wave functions, but the overlapping of states continues. That means that he says there is no real time, in the sense that all what is possible is always all together. So I should say it's an infinity of states, and our mind, our body, our brain cannot know what is infinite if it is finite. It has a lot of narrowing channels through which it can perceive only something. And so it's like in India they say the origin of Maya. Maya is an illusion, but it is not a subjective illusion. It's a shared illusion. So everyone thinks the reality is just like that. Like many centuries ago, people were convinced that the Earth is flat, and now are growing. I know some people who are but anyway, the Earth is flat, and so it was an illusion. But since it was shared by many, it was believed true. I always say that the number doesn't make truth. So it's not because many people believe to something that it becomes true. And so there is this infinity of states that we cannot know at this level, because there are limited channels. And so we just perceive either or. Just now, at the very heart of our experience, of present experience, there is an utter simplicity that is so simple that we cannot observe it as an object before us. And we don't need, because we are it. This simplicity is the very ground and essence of our experience, and of every specific experience that arises and passes away, And if you know, when we speak about reality, we are actually speaking about experience, in the sense that no aspect whatsoever of what we call reality can appear outside experience. No sound, no color, no thought, they can appear only in experience. So, as far as it concerns us, reality and experience are just two words for the same thing. And the very ground and essence of experience is this simplicity, this unknowable simplicity. And albeit nameless, this simplicity is usually given some names, some key words that aren't used just to mean what is, but just as a hint at it. One of these key words is consciousness or awareness. And when it is used, this word is pointing at the clarity of this simplicity, the clarity that sheds light and allows everything to appear. When we think about awareness or consciousness, we are meaning the clarity of this simplicity. What makes our experiences vivid, alive? But usually there is a problem with these terms like awareness or consciousness, because they are usually understood as a mental subjective function, the function of cognizing, of knowing things. And this is, of course, it would be too reductive, too narrow, this use of the terms in order to mean this simplicity. So when terms like awareness and consciousness are used, they are often confused with what we are conscious of, we are aware of. We are constantly aware of experience. So we are aware, you are aware of my words, of the singing birds, of the colors you see, or the thoughts that are in your mind. Those are called aware or conscious experiences. And the science also studies them, can study them, because there are correlates between the brain activities that you can measure with machines and so on, and the contents of awareness. Thoughts, emotions, perceptions, bodily sensations. But the very fact of being aware as such that sort of awakeness or aware presence, independently from what we are aware of, cannot be explained by science, because as Shantana was saying this morning also, in order to observe, to study, science needs awareness. So awareness is already there before any attempt to understand reality through science can begin. And so you cannot, science is like us in this room. We can study every detail of the room, but we can never know the shape of the building where this room is inside. So sometimes it's used, the key words awareness or consciousness, to mean that clarity of simplicity of being. But there are these problems about misunderstanding, because when we use the word awareness to point at that simplicity, we are pointing at something that is far beyond any cognizing activity of human understanding. Another word, key word, that is used for this simplicity is now, or the present. Since no experience can happen outside the now. You know, the word present comes, etymologically, comes from the Latin pre, that means before or prior to, and esse, that means being. So, it's interesting that even in the word, the present is what is prior to every being that appears. Is the dimension that allows experience to exist. And as such, it's the source that sheds its light of existence to everything, every experience. And as such, this light is shared by everyone of us. The present actually is the only existing real time. We usually think that the present or the now is just a very short ham slide inside a huge sandwich, huge past, huge future, and only this fleeting time that is the present. But actually this is just a construction of mind. Because everything can exist and appear only now, including the memories that we call the past and the thoughts that we call the future. Mystics made it clear that our ordinary idea about time is an idea of a fleeting, of present, sorry, is an idea of a fleeting present. Nunc fluens, that means a now that changes, that a fleeting now. That is the ordinary idea. But the real present for the mystics of our tradition, of Western tradition, is defined as nunc stans. That means a now that never goes away. That is always when? Now, of course. Experiences that appear and disappear are really fleeting experiences. but the light of now is always here to illuminate them. I invite you to do a very simple experiment, relying on your direct experience of now. Please try to find the precise edge, the precise borderline where the past ends and the present begins, or where the present ends and the future begins. Can you find this edge? Wherever we see, we only see the now. This edge, this borderline, is only in our mind and divides three different concepts that we have built. Past, present, and future. But it doesn't divide anything about the now, where even these lines, these mental lines appear and disappear. And if I invite you to another funny experiment, just to struggle as hard as you can, just to get out of the now for half a second. Can you do it? It's impossible because you and now are the same. And so, when there are meditation instructions to live in the present, they are quite futile because we cannot do otherwise anywhere, anyway. And this now is the same now of 10 minutes ago, the same now of 10 years ago, the same now of 10 million years ago. It never ended. Time is the measure of changing. We, in this now, we perceive changing experiences. This is the only perception we have, changing things. Then we try to measure this changing, this movement, through time. Time is a measure, because in nature you don't find minutes, hours, years, days. You find changing experiences that appear and disappear. And in order to perceive something changing, there must be a background that doesn't change. That is the present. While we, in our construction, we just have equated the present with the second, and we think that the present just goes away. It's very funny. So, if we see our experience, that is, as I said, the same word for reality, we can see that it has two indivisible, inseparable aspects. Something that changes, the experiences that arise and pass away, and something that doesn't change, the now, the simplicity of being, whatever we want to call it. And it is, they are not separable. Like when you look at a film, a movie in TV, no? The movie is always changing. The screen is always there, doesn't change, but both are not separable, are the same thing. But the difference is that the changing aspect of experience has forms. Every form is limited. A form is a frame. There are forms of sounds, the frequency of the sound. There are forms of color, the frequency of the light. There are many waves that we just through a word or a concept transform in a specific form, and our sensory channel can catch that form. For some example, our eyes can can grasp only a narrow part of the electromagnetic spectrum, only some frequencies, and each frequency just is given a name, red, violet, and so on, no? So they appear that when we construct our visual perception as forms, definite forms. We have these patterns that we recognize as forms, and the forms are two main characteristics. That first, they are limited, finite. Second, they change. They appear and disappear. And our mind can only perceive forms, can only perceive what is limited and what appears and disappears. While the background of all, this is that I call this utter simplicity of being, is formless. Even if it appears as all the forms that we see. And so mind cannot perceive it, cannot know it. Or it knows this simplicity through the variety of the forms, the complication, the complexity of forms. Shankara calls this simplicity Brahman, and he says the universe is nothing but Brahman. So people want to perceive Brahman, but we cannot help not perceiving it, because everything we perceive is Brahman as an apparent limited form. And so the forms appear and disappear, but Brahman is always there, like the now, like the screen with the film. The screen is always there. The film appears in the screen and changes. And at the same time, the screen doesn't change. But so our mind our mind cannot perceive the unchangeable side of experience. And because it can only perceive something, an object. And even mind is very tricky, because transforms even itself into something that is the subject, as a separate one in a world of many other objects. And the duality comes about that. And when maybe our mind hears about the miracle of this utter simplicity of being, immediately transforms it into something to reach, into a goal far away that it wants to. From time to time, we can have an experience of this simplicity. We were speaking about beauty, about peace, about love. We can have an experience that that somehow is permeated by the taste of this simplicity. And sometimes there are also moments when every form disappears, and the mind finds in a state of emptiness. So there is a flavor of simplicity there. The problem is that in that particular experience, in that particular state, meditative states or contemplative states or spontaneously also, when everything disappears, there still remains the mind, a subject, perceiving a special experience where of the absence of all other experiences. So, you know, it sees a state where there is the absence of experience and mistakes that state for simplicity. It's a mistake because in reality it is still an experience that arises and passes away, and in that experience there is still a subject perceiving as an object the absence of all other objects, and says that is the simplicity, while the simplicity includes both that experience and me, the observing subject. Is not apart from that simplicity, it's just an expression of it. So, a third key word to hint at that simplicity is an important term, the absolute. And it's interesting also the translation of the etymology of this word. It comes from the Latin ab, that means from, and solutus, that means dissolved or free, in the sense that when you can have a handful of salt and keep it imprisoned in your fist, but when the salt is dissolved in water, it is free from every attempt to grasp it, though it is still entirely there. It hasn't lost its essence, but it's free. This is the idea of absolute freedom. And here there are many traps for us, because we identify ourselves exclusively with this body-mind, and we think that this me is separate from the rest of the universe. Even the science says that it's not true. Not only quantum physics, but also system theory says that the universe is just one process. Everything needs all the rest of the universe in order to be. So there are no separation. There are a huge amount. There is a huge amount of differences, but no real separation. But we live as if we were a separate entity, every day having to deal with life, with the problems of outside. We feel limited, we feel incomplete, and especially we don't feel free. And so we are a part of the whole that believes to be separate and that wants to be free. There is a bad news. A part cannot be free, because a part is always conditioned by all the other parts. So as long as a separate part of this universe I am looking for freedom, I won't find it, because the only freedom is, the only free entity is the whole, because there is nothing outside conditioning it. That is why in India, for example, when they describe the actions that we do in our life, those actions can be described in terms of cause and effect, conditioning forces, something that conditions some other thing. We are pushed by something and we push other things. But how to describe the movement of the whole? They can call it Shiva, they can call it the Brahman or whatever. How is the movement of the whole? And the way they describe it is saying that it is a dance or a play. Because if you notice, when we are playing, if it's not our job, when we are playing, singing, or dancing, we do not those movements in order to arrive from the point A to the point B, because it's important to arrive to the point B, and that is the aim. When I dance, the aim is not to arrive to the point B, it's just to enjoy the movement since the beginning, since the point A. And as Alan Watts used to say, it would be really sad to sing a song with the aim to arrive as soon as possible to the end. He says otherwise musicians would compose only finals, and people would go to the concert and say in the orchestra, "Zanza," and finished. You know, it's not that. So the movement of the universe is rather a dance. A dance is a play without an external aim, goal to reach. So a part can never be free as long as it sees itself as a separate part. But it is possible to see that the whole has no parts, has an infinite diversity of expressions, all different but not separate. But as long as we think that we are a part, a separate part, and we want to be free, there will be a misunderstanding. We will mistake free for apart. The only idea, the only way to be free, we think, since we are a part that is conditioned by other parts, is to isolate us as we can from everything else, in order not to have the influence of what is outside. And this is an impossible task, of course, since everything is connected. And so, what happens is that we divide reality into separate domains. There is the absolute, that is the paradise. Imagine as a place of perpetual ecstasy, where everything will be good and no problems. That is, and we will try to reach that paradise, escaping the hell of our trivial everyday life. And this is really to go against reality, really impossible to do that. Unexpectedly, from time to time, the glowing beauty of this utter simplicity shines through our life for a while. And we have those kind of experiences I was describing before. And when the mind has one of those experiences, it says, wow, I finally got the point. It doesn't realize that that experience, as all the others, comes and go. And the mind says, I must stabilize that experience, maybe through some practice. And again, the idea of having to reach the paradise goes on. And sometimes, I don't know if you happen to see spiritual circles, there is always this question, how to reconcile the absolute with everyday life, with trivial everyday life. How to reconcile them? It's an impossible task because they are just the same thing. You know, how to reconcile the film and the screen? How to reconcile the waves and the sea? How to reconcile the ascent and the descent if they are just two different names for the same slope? There is no need to do that. So whenever we try to abandon our trivial everyday life in order to reach the paradise of the absolute, we are involved in an impossible task, and we are resisting the present. If now there is anger, if now there is pain, if now there is anxiety or fear, all of them are the actual expression of the simplicity of now, in this moment. To resist them is tantamount to the impossible task to escape, to evade the present. That is not a solution. But even resisting the present and trying to escape it is a perfect expression of this simplicity. Is what exists, how the absolute is now. So the absolute is not a medicine for pain. When there is pain, the absolute is the pain. There is a nice story, maybe some of you knows it, but I like to tell. There was a man who had a strong faith in God. And one day, a flood became to invade his where he lived. And so gradually the water was rising up and up. And so he went to the first floor of his house. And after a while, a boat full of people passed by, and the man of the boat said, "Please come with us, we are just going to a safe place." But the man said, No, I am confident that God will save me. So, thank you, I stay. And the water was rising up, and he went to the second floor. And after a while, a dinghy is there. I didn't know this word. I had to. Dinghy came with a man, rowing man, and he said, "Please, I am the last one with a boat, so please come with me and save your life." No, it would be a sense of not confidence to God. So my faith will save me, and so he goes. And the water goes up, and he goes to the roof of the house. And when he was there, a helicopter came, and they threw down a rope ladder and said, "We are the last ones. I'm just rescuing the last people. So please, this is your last chance to save your life." He says, No, I am faith in God. Thank you. And so the helicopter goes, and the water rises, and at last he dies, drowned in the water. Of course, he goes to the paradise. This is undeniable because of his face. But he was a little bit upset because he felt somehow betrayed by God. So when he meets God, says, "Dear God, I had so much faith in you. I was confident that you would would have saved my life. Why didn't you do? And he says, I sent you a boat, a dinghy, an helicopter. What do you want more? You know. So this story tells us that the separate ego, the separate has nothing to gain from the absolute. Really nothing to. As much to fear about it, because when the absolute is recognized, the separate ego evaporates, dissolves. So it has nothing to gain, really. And when the separate ego appears with this resistance, even that is just an expression of the absolute. Therefore, the absolute cannot be reached, because it is always here and now, in the form of our breath, our heart beating, the sounds, the hearing, the thoughts, the memories, and also the appearance of the illusory idea of a separate ego. And even appears as our attempt to reach what is already here. This is the dance. And when this non-separation is recognized by no one, a deep ease permeates the life. And then you can fall in love with life in all its expressions, painful or pleasurable. Because when you have fallen in love with someone, you accept everything, even if it behaves in a ugly, you know. But if you love, you can't help to love. And as I said, love dissolves the separation between the lover and the beloved, until nothing remains but a wildly free aliveness that shines as the utter simplicity of being. When you can recognize, or it can happen that there is a recognition that you are it. But when you don't recognize it, you are it anyway. Thank you. We have time to share silence or questions or thoughts. The only thing that I ask you is, because my poor understanding of English, to speak slowly and clearly.
Hello? Can you hear me? Ciao Mauro. One of my pleasures in life has been, and one of my jobs has been as a Jyotishi, as doing Vedic astrology. Mm. And in the last year of a lot of my own transformation, it's been very hard, because because my experience of cause and effect is changing, because it was easier before when it was clear that doing astrology and helping people was to relieve suffering.
Yeah.
But I don't want to relieve suffering.
You don't want.
Te lo direi in italiano. Can I ask the question in Italian?
Yeah, first in Italian, then
I can translate. Like, i Shastra dicono che l'astrologia, quello che hanno state le cognizioni dei rishi, eccetera, erano per alleviare il dolore degli altri. Però quello che sta cambiando dentro di me è non voglio che l'altro non senta dolore, voglio che l'altro impari invece a sentire, attraversare cioè non è più il dolore come una cosa da evitare e quindi beat karma o prevenire per evitare, però è più un... non lo so.
Ok, lei traduci.
I can translate. Something around, I don't want others to not experience their suffering. The more my experience becomes to learn how to really be with my suffering, then, you know, what is the role of things like astrology or counseling when you're trying to sort of beat karma or avoid something, instead of just learning that that is also a flavor? It's not clear because I'm still sorting the pieces.
Thank you for the question. Many things to explore about suffering and ways to relieve it. If, of course, in the talk before, I spoke about the absolute, and of course, if I suffer for an headache, I don't invoke the help of the absolute. I take a pill or I go to the doctor, and the pill is the absolute. The doctor is the absolute. So there is, it's a natural fact that we try to relieve suffering when it is possible. It would be a little bit sadistic just to create deliberately some suffering in order to make people learn, as it is done in many spiritual circles where all is very hard and the people are doing a lot of effort and struggle because this reinforces. As a meditation teacher that I knew used to say, and maybe it is an English way of saying, come si dice chiodo in inglese? Nail. If the only tool you have is a martello, a hammer, everything begins dangerously to seem a nail. And so there is the way of the warrior, and you have to suffer, otherwise you don't earn the paradise. That is, I think that life gives spontaneously so many occasions of suffering that is really foolish to build a new ones deliberately in order to reach something. When I used to do a lot of meditation, it was a Vipassana meditation, 10 days, I was sitting cross-legged and I had a lot of pains at the knees, and I was really angry because of that, because my legs had nothing, they are perfectly sane, so why do they have this strong pain and so? And I was from time to time opening an eye, and was seeing all people just immobile, and I imagined that they had no problems with the legs, and so, while many of them had just the same problems as me. The idea was that if you suffer, you deserve what you are looking for. And that is not the case, I think. People try to find peace through effort. That means when you say fighting for the peace, the same thing. So this is. But in our existence, we have many situations that generate suffering and many tools to deal with it. Your work, psychotherapy, meditation are all good instruments to reduce and sometimes just to eliminate some form of suffering. So there is nothing bad in that. But life, as long as we have a body and a mind, we will be exposed to ups and downs. Someone said that the life is a sexual illness, an illness that is, life is an illness that is generated sexually, that ends always with death. so an incurable illness generated by sex. So as long as we have a body and a mind, we are exposed to suffering, and when we are exposed to suffering, we have fear, we have anxiety, we have anger, and someone thinks that he becomes awakened, all that will disappear. No one knows what will happen after awakening, because even awakening for me is an obsolete concept. But everything can change, nothing can change. We don't know until it happens. So once Nisargadatta said that the best way to help someone is to put him into the condition of not needing any other help. The best way to help someone is when someone then doesn't need any more help. You are hungry, and I can take some fish, and I can give the fish until you need. Or I can teach you how to build a net and fish yourself. So the point is not to avoid suffering. We do naturally that. If I can, I avoid suffering. If I can, I find pleasure. That is natural. The point is to touch or to recognize a deep space where there is happiness, because all is complete. Like the sea. If you identify only with the wave, you are a separate wave. The other waves are bigger or lesser, or more beautiful than you or less beautiful. You are just a wave, and the wave is a form that is born and will die. But in the meantime, you are the water of the wave that doesn't go anywhere, is not born and doesn't die. And while there is a strong storm and tempest with the waves on the surface. At the same time, the same water, deep down, is calm and peaceful. We are both. We are in spiritual circles. There is this idea that you are not the waves. The observer as the position, the stance of the witness stance. You can observe things. And if you, for example, observe your anxiety or a physical pain, if you observe your anger, that means that something in you is not in the anger. Every time you can observe something about you, you discover that there is a point that is free from what you are observing. Because the problem is not only that sometimes we are angry, sometimes we are anxious or fearful. The problem is that when there is fear, I am just totally inside the fear or inside the anger and so on. If you observe them, you can find that something is outside, is free from what it is observing. And that is a very precious gift, but is not non-duality. Actually, it's a strong duality, because you say, I am not this body that is full of pain. I am not this anger. I am only the witness, the imperturbable witness. And this is tantamount to a defense mechanism. I don't want to feel. I want to find, to escape from that. And so I don't see that I can't separate the witness from what it is witnessing. So there is this completeness of the deep ocean where all is peaceful, and the surface where there are the waves. We are both of them. We are both of them. And when this recognition comes, we find that something is always appearing and disappearing, is born and will die, and something that never is timeless, never is born, nor dies, nor changes. We are both of them. In this sense, what I call happiness is not pleasure. Pleasure is a contrary, pain. Pleasure needs a trigger, needs some sensorial or mental input. I can have pleasure making love. I need some sensory impressions. I can have pleasure listening to music. I need a stimulation, an external stimulation, and according to the intensity of the state of my organism and of the stimulation, pleasure can be more or less. Happiness is not more or less. Either you are happy, or if a tiny thing is missing, you can have strong pleasure but not happiness. The essence, the flavor of happiness, when you are happy, the thought is, oh, now I'm not missing anything. Now it's okay as it is. Nothing is lacking. This is when we are happy. Maybe when we are just on the sand near the sea, and for a while we don't need anything more. So happiness is the flavor of completeness. And since we are always complete, even if we don't realize, happiness is our deeper nature, always there. And when we convince ourselves that we are a separate I, we feel incomplete, and through any desire, we try to reach happiness, that is completeness. And all this movement happens where you are already complete, without realizing. And so, that is an expression of completeness. Completeness couldn't be so complete if it didn't have also the feeling of incompleteness. You understand? I heard that some ancient Japanese artists that made pots. You know, Japanese people are very, very obsessive about perfection. Just to drink a cup of tea, it becomes very complicated. So they do these pots with the complete attention in order to avoid any come si dice, nessun difetto, any imperfection. And when they are going to finish, they put deliberately an imperfection in the pot. Because perfection without imperfection is not perfection at all. Because it's not whole, complete. Only when perfection has imperfection in it, it becomes complete and can be an expression of happiness. And if you look at the Tai Chi symbol, you know that round circle where there is a part is black, another is white, and there is like an S in the middle. And they are like, maybe that this image was taken from the image of two fishes making love. So, and they represent the two opposites that are inseparable. And just where the black is more black, in the middle of the black, there is a white dot. And just in the middle of the white part, there is a black dot. And it's the same. So we can be angry, fearful, anxious. We can suffer a lot. We can feel a deep discomfort in our life, and it would be unnatural not to suffer if something very heavy happens. And in the meantime, in the deep of our selves, there is still a completeness whose flavor is happiness. At least you can sense it, even if you are absorbed in your everyday problems and sufferings. Please.
Hi. Could you please talk about awakening being an obsolete concept?
Sorry, awakening being?
An obsolete concept, which
yes.
you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Yes, well, just earlier we heard that awakening for our speaker is an obsolete concept, and this became.
I often, when I introduce some of my talks, I often say that if you are looking for God, since God is omnipresent, that means everywhere, it must be also here now. If you are looking for true reality, if it's the whole it must be here now. And if you are looking for maybe your true self, since you are here, your true self must be here now. So, whatever you are looking for, you couldn't see it well. You can not know how it is, but it must be here now. So every teaching that speaks about a progressive path in order to reach a goal that is not here and now is futile. Not only is futile, but the idea that you have to reach, because as I was speaking before, we cannot be separate from the whole. When we ask, who am I? The only right answer would be, I am the universe, because there is no real part that can be separate from the universe. It's as if our stomach would say, I am a stomach apart from the body. It's not possible. There is the whole. So, but we don't live our life like that. We are convinced, even our perception is that we are imprisoned in this body and mind and separate. And since we think to be that our awareness, the problem is awareness, that we think that awareness is in mind and body. I sometimes invite people, look at your right hand. Is your awareness inside the hand? Do you can feel what is inside? Or is your hand totally immersed in your awareness? When I say that this glass is outside me, if for the word me, I mean this body and mind, it's true. This glass of water is outside me because for me, I mean this body and mind that is another object in space and time, different from that. So, okay, that glass of water is outside me, if me is body and mind. But is it also outside my awareness? If it were, I couldn't perceive it. So what we do instead is that we just make one package of awareness that is the space where everything appears, and body and mind, as if they were just the same, and awareness were inside the mind that is inside the body. So, to go back to your question, when we feel identified exclusively with this body and mind, we are this body and mind, but not only this body and mind, that is the point. But if we think, if we believe that we are only this body and mind and nothing else, we feel incomplete. We feel lacking. We suffer this incompleteness. And so we try to rescue, because we have some memory, maybe unconscious memory, of a time where everything was complete. Maybe when we were babies, newborn babies, and we not yet had the difference between what is internal, what is external. There was not I. There was only an awareness where everything was happening without separation. So we have some memory maybe of this completeness, and we look for it as if it were not already here. And for this illusory identification with a small part of the unit, and so we have these goals. At the beginning, maybe we think that if we become famous, then we will be complete. But you know, when we are famous, you can lose at any moment that situation. So we can look for power in order to control everything. I should have many things to say about that. It's interesting. Or maybe we think that we can have completeness through the money, to become rich. As Arnaud Desjardins once said that richness doesn't give happiness, but only rich people know this truth. So if you are not rich first, you have to become rich in order to understand it. And so we look for, and when we have tried everything, richness, power, become famous, have a wonderful partner, and so, and we see that in any case, we don't yet feel complete. We heard about awakening, illumination, and we think, oh, that is. And so we changed only the goal, but every time we believe that we are walking along a path that in time will gradually bring to us to a goal that is not here, we are reinforcing the illusion that is the only reason why we don't feel complete. I quote by memory, but once Ramana Maharshi was very, very clear about that. He said, first of all, we limitate ourselves to a small self. Just we think that we are limited people. Then we suffer because of this. And we look for something that could help us to rescue the infinite that we have lost. And so we do, for example, meditation or any way, any path. But if the path is born from an illusion, how could it bring you beyond illusion? And he said, one of the most amazing things is that we are reality, and though albeit we are the reality, the fact that we are reality, we look for reality. And he said, one day you will laugh at this. And what will be the day that you will laugh is already here now. So, if someone wants to teach you a way that in time, a path that in time can bring you to the completeness, is just delaying the time, and is similar to someone who pretends to teach a wave how to become water. And if someone says, I am enlightened and you aren't, is like a wave that says, I am more humid than you. You know, that is, because for me, awakening is an obsolete concept, because it can mean some experience that one has in his life where the utter simplicity shines through an experience. And so that experience becomes very meaningful for us. But like all experiences, it comes and goes away. The idea that after awakening, all will be perfect. I won't be no more, I will not no more be angry or fearful, is just everyone, until we have a body and a mind, we have a breaking point. It may be that this breaking point of your calmness is very, very delicate, very or it's strong, but there is a breaking point. After all, imagine an awakened person and his son dies. Imagine that the person says, oh no, for me it's just the same as before. It would be very strange. Because if you are a body and a mind, then something in you remains quiet, the deep. But if you have a body and mind, the body and mind cries when you lose. It would be not human. Do you know Marpa? Marpa was a Buddhist Tibetan enlightened, and was the master, the guru of Milarepa, who is very famous as a poet of the Buddhist Tibetan tradition. And he was not a monk. Marpa was married with, and he had a son, and one day the son died. And Marpa was crying with all his heart. And some disciple says, Master, but you are teaching us that everything is an illusion. So why are you crying because of your son? And Marpa said, yes, because of all illusion, among all the illusions, the death of a son is the hardest one. We have some 10 minutes time. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this question may be a bit tedious because it's formalistic. But so what if you are saying the mind has various experiences? The mind is limited. Therefore, you cannot experience the absolute. You can only experience things down the narrow channels. Excuse me. If therefore you have experiences of, pain, fear, anger, whatever, you also have an experience when you meditate, say, or have a religious experience or a spiritual experience, which may be an experience of the absence of certain other things, but is nonetheless an experience.
Yes.
Is therefore any reason to give it a kind of exalted status? So this experience takes me closer to something which is true, but the others don't. Why? I mean, because a lot of people would say that there's a kind of primacy to this experience. But is there any good reason for saying so?
We cannot be closer to what we are. This is the short answer. Independently from any kind of experience you have, the highest as the lowest, you cannot be apart from what you already are. So there is some of you has heard about what is the Dzogchen. Is a non-dualist tradition in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism. And there is a very good, very interesting text of a Dzogchen master that says that the wave cannot go nearer or farther from the sea. Not even 1 centimeter can be closer to the sea or distant from the sea, because it is the sea, is an activity of the sea. So we cannot really go closer or have a path of progressive in time, a progressive path in time, in order to reach something that is already here. And so, it's not important which kind of experience we have from this point of view. In our personal life, there are some activities like meditation, like that that we like to do. So we do, and we have also some results. If you want to reach some goals from the perspective of our ego, you can do something in order to reach. For example, you can do some kind of meditation in order to reach states of deep peace that usually we don't experiment in our everyday consciousness. And they are quite important for us. They are very, very pleasurable, not only, but they purify our mental activities. We can think better, we can relate better. So, for example, to practice in order to reach some peace of mind, deep, beyond the normal peace, you can fall really in states of silence that becomes deeper and deeper. It's quite interesting that. But of course, you must also be aware that if this also Ramana Maharshi was repeating it, every new state that was not before, and then you can build and reach, will end, will have an end. Everything that you can do can be undone, and sooner or later it will. Everything you build or you accumulate, it will exhaust itself because of the nature of what you built or what you accumulate. So every new state that you try to reach, however pleasurable and worthwhile is to reach, because in our life we have to do something, no? So it's better to do something that we like, okay? But everything that we can reach, if you have meditated one life in samadhi and profound states, if you have a cancer at the bones, that peace goes away. And it is a great teaching, that even that peace, since it is conditioned, go away. Only the unconditioned, only what is not born will not die. And so, as Nisargadatta said, the question is, instead of looking for what you haven't, see what is always with you. That is also simpler. There was another thing that I wanted to say. Yes, meditation can be a good tool to reach not only the peace of mind. There are many other aims, goals. For example, a good integration body and mind, a good relationship, a better relationship with others or with the situation in life. So meditation is a treasure from this point of view, and the idea is that if you practice it, you will reach these goals. That is quite good. The problem comes when you transform what is already here into a goal to reach with meditation. When you think that you have to reach God because it's not already here. And so you, meditating, you build this trap that the more you practice to reach awakening or whatever, the completeness, the less chance you have to realize that it's already with you. Because you convince yourself, if you are looking for, it's because you don't have yet, of course. Otherwise you don't look, don't seek. I say, seeking itself is the only hindrance to realize that we are what we are seeking. And so, sometimes I use the metaphor of trying to see the darkness with the lamp that is turned on. And you see, you are looking for the darkness and say, I won't turn off the lamp until I find the darkness. And as I usually say, fortunately for us, sooner or later, the batteries just finish by themselves. And okay, this is the darkness. That is what happens. No, it is all spontaneous. Even our conviction, our idea that we lack something, even our idea to be in a separate I, even our seeking what is already here, are the perfect expression of what we are. They are not problems. They are free expressions. But as they begin, they will finish like the batteries. And sometimes since all this involves a completeness deep down, which is timeless, so no path can Krishnamurti said, the truth is a pathless land. Because it is timeless. When I say already here, I don't say something in time. I mean something where even time just unfolds. So you cannot reach it in any way because you are it already. So it's really not so important that I realize this completeness, whether I realize it or not. Because anyway, it's here. Once, I don't remember if it was Sylvester. Sylvester went here last year. I don't know if I read from a book of him or not, but somewhere I read this sentence that awakening is when the idea of being a separate ego dissolves. But at the end of our life, when we die, in any case, it will dissolve. So why are we so pushed to reach this awakening in life? And the answer is because it is more chic, more so. Okay, lunchtime. Thank you very much for your questions.